snowy day. If you can't hear us, if we're talking and you're thinking what's going on, feel free to put questions in the chat, and Natasha can type that up for those of you who wouldn't be able to hear us say that. So as we said, this is who we are. In the chat, if you could post your name and your role, what you teach and where you teach, that would be awesome. So your name automatically comes up if you put the full thing in when you logged in, but what your role is, what you teach, where you teach or work, like that. Thank you, Jan. You're such a good example. Gupta. And then we will be doing an activity while people are filling this out. We'll be doing a learning thing here in a little while, a learning opportunity in a little while, that will involve a backward plan. We have a couple that you can use, but if there's one of yours that you would like to use for this, feel free to go and just kind of have it somewhere where you know where it is. So you can look for that right now. So let's see, we have literacy and 8th grade language arts and 6th grade social studies science, nice. And a BRT friend. And 4th grade teacher, yes, all subjects, that's logical, great. Well, thank you for the introductions and sharing that information with us. We want to talk you through briefly kind of the structure for this webinar, but we will preface it also by saying that this is a pretty ambitious agenda. We're going to get to what we get to, and we're not going to worry about it. And for those of you who are recording, no problem, start us, or who are watching the recording, start it and stop it wherever works best for you. Take the time that you need. So we did the introductions already. We're going to talk through what it is that we're trying to accomplish in the webinar. Connect with some prior knowledge in previous webinars that we've had on the stage 3 topic. Then we'll look through at stage 3 and prioritizing through 3 lenses: backward planning, looking at student data, and then other filters that you could have like rigor and relevance or blooms. And then connect, extend, challenge at the end to help you organize your thinking. And then we'll talk about how to get credit for those of you who don't know. Questions, screams of agony. I won't hear the screams anyway, but if you have questions, you can type them. All right, while our person is typing, we'll talk through the stage 1. Our enduring understandings are about patterns. If you're familiar with the elementary GVC 2.0, you'll see this come straight from there. So we're trying to model using a similar pattern in professional development. So patterns emerge from actions and responses. Just thinking about how we create learning design for us as teachers, if we've been in the profession for a little while. Hi, Susan. We will notice that we have probably certain trends that we tend to do with our learning design, certain patterns that we establish, and we just want to look at those and think critically about them. And are they good patterns? Do we need to make some changes? Our essential questions are about what makes a learning opportunity world-class. We'll address that early on. And then how do you prioritize learning activities, or we'll call them learning opportunities, throughout the rest of the webinar. And our outcome would be for you to analyze and evaluate what it is, the patterns that you have established. Like I mentioned before, if you've been doing this for a little while, you probably, teaching for a little while, you probably have certain styles that you use. And we're just going to look at those and see if we can do anything else to make them even more fabulous than they already are. Welcome, Lorraine. Welcome, Susan. All right. So our initial thinking, and this is something that we'll have Natasha and I be a little bit more quiet, give you a chance to post in the chat. In your consideration, what makes learning opportunities world-class, and how do you currently prioritize learning activities or opportunities? So I'll give you just a few minutes to do some thinking on that. And you'll see that I'm going to pause my video, so there'll be a little pause sign. I'll start it back up again after a couple of minutes. It's just hard to maintain a consistently cheerful and vacant look. On camera.
I think I'm back on. Okay, great thinking. I see a lot about prioritizing by looking at alignment with outcomes and looking at student need, which is what we're going to talk about in a few minutes. So I want to go back and review a little bit that if you joined us in our vetting learning activities and opportunities webinar, we talked about what makes learning opportunities world-class in the first place. And a lot of you have mentioned some of these. We want to go back and just get a solid foundation because this really is the first lens when you're designing your stage 3 to look through to see if your world-class learning opportunities and instructional strategies are going to be right for a world-class backward plan. So first of all, we're looking at, are they sustainable? So are these learning opportunities or activities really going to create sustainable long-term learning? Are they integrated? So are they interdisciplinary? Are we, just like we don't really learn or think in boxes, are we asking our students to think across curriculum and outside of our classroom? Are they differentiated? So are we differentiating to meet student need, which I saw a lot of you mention as you're prioritizing? Are we differentiating to meet student need? Are we differentiating our content, process, or our product? And for those of you who have worked a lot in differentiated instruction, you know that those are the 3 areas that we really look at differentiating. We also look to see our world-class learning opportunities, do they include 21st century skills? So do they include direct instruction in these skills, and do we give feedback on them? So not just putting them in our outcomes, but do our opportunities, our learning opportunities in our classroom, are we coaching students through these skills, and are we providing them timely feedback on how they did in those skills? And are these learning opportunities and strategies engaging? So do they include real-life learning? Are we asking students to collaborate? I know Russell mentioned, are we giving them global platforms to think and create and share? So that's all part of being engaging. And if you want to see our conversation about what vetting these learning activities in the first place, there's a link here so you can go to the webinar that we hosted a month ago.
And in just a moment, I'll put that link in the chat so that as we move beyond it, you can scroll back up and get back to it. Welcome. I'm glad that those of you who are having technical difficulties are getting it all worked back out. And I noticed a lot of people mentioning authentic, real world, that type of thing, and I think that falls really nicely under engaging, don't you? And
yeah,
interdisciplinary.
Yeah.
Now I'm looking, oh, this is funny, because of the order we turned our cameras on.
We're looking
I'm
like
on top and we look, yeah. Ignore that.
Well,
all right. So I'll be putting that vetting learning activities piece in, or link in for you here in just a second, and we're going to move on to talk a little bit about what is the first lens for this webinar. And I'm noticing I must have skipped a slide somewhere because we wanted to talk about what our, oh no, we already talked about our stage 1. Okay. So the first lens, when we're prioritizing for this webinar, if you've already vetted and they meet those 5 filters that I just posted on the chat in green, then it's looking at stages 1 and 2 of your backward plan, your enduring understandings, your essential questions, big ideas, outcomes, and then the assessments that you've chosen, and making sure that your outcomes have those 21st century skills embedded as appropriate. We want you to ask yourself some questions about that.
So we really want you to ask yourself, does what and how I'm teaching support students in meeting or exceeding the goals established in stage 1? So if we're looking at our prioritization through our first lens of our stage 1 and 2 backward plan, we really want to look at, when you're considering those stage 3 activities or opportunities, are we providing opportunities for students to meet and exceed the outcomes that we've written in our stage 1? Are they aligned? And also, do the learning activities and instructional strategies that I'm considering allow all students to meet or exceed or to perform at the most highest level on my chosen assessment? So that's that stage 2 reflection. So looking at, do your opportunities tie kids back to being able to be highly successful on those assessments that you've chosen in your stage 2?
So we figured for us, as we do the learning, and this is where we referred earlier to having, if you wanted to go get one of your own backward plans, we thought it would be best to try talking about this through some actual experiences, so trying it out a little bit. At least that's just how I learn best. I'm hoping that it helps the 12 of you who are in here now. I'm so excited we're getting more people. So if you have one of your own backward plans that you'd like to use in this, for this activity, you can. Or we have links to two actual authentic unit plans created by teachers in our system right now. One of them is a 5th grade teacher for language arts. One of them is an 8th grade teacher. They've been very generous. These aren't exemplar plans necessarily. They're just plans that people have been willing to share with us, and they're willing to look at their stage 3 with us and say, what areas can we improve? So they're being very vulnerable, and we appreciate that. If you would rather work on your own plan, though, and look at that, that is just fine. But what we're going to ask that you do is a little bit of toggling back and forth here in a minute. So we have 3 questions that we want you to keep in mind. Absolutely, Jen. Whatever works best for you. And I'll put the links to those plans in the chat in a minute after I have these questions out of the way, so that if you want to look at someone else's, you're welcome to do so. So the 3 questions we want you to ask yourself regarding this first lens of backward planning are, does your stage 3 meet the criteria for world-class stage 3? So those same things that Natasha was talking about earlier. Are your learning opportunities and instructional strategies sustainable, integrated, differentiated? Do they have 21st century skills? Are they engaging for students? Then the second question is, do they support students in meeting or exceeding world-class outcomes from stage 1? So that's more of an alignment piece. So looking at your stage 3, all the things that they're doing in stage 3, do those add up so that the students are going to be successful actually hitting those targets that you've established in stage 1? This is pretty logical stuff, but I've seen it myself in my own plans. Every now and again I'm like, wait a minute, does that really fit? And I have to look back, and it's kind of a cycle for me. And then the third question that we want you to ask is, are the learning activities or opportunities that you have designed, do they lead students to the highest level of success? Do they set the students up for success on whatever assessments you've chosen? For example, if you have an assessment that is of a particular style, do you give students practice with that, interacting with information in a similar style, so that they will be successful? So we want you just to have a few minutes. Thank you. You're so good. So we want you to take a few minutes either looking at one of your own plans or looking at one of those 2 plans that are linked. Let us know if there are any troubles on the sharing at all. And just say, hey, based on this stage 3, does it line up well with stage 1? Does it set kids up for success in stage 2? And does it kind of meet those criteria for world class? How many enduring understandings do I envision having per year? So I think that very much depends on the teacher. For me, I'm kind of a consistency person, so I probably would be likely to have just 1 or 2 and just go with that through the whole year, but that's just me. Everybody, there are different ways of doing it. What would you do?
I would do a smaller amount of enduring understandings and change essential questions based on units. I think the essential questions are 9 to 12 weeks maybe to grapple with across content area. And again, I'm talking from a middle level perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that your enduring understandings, I'm only going to have a couple that I would have kids really grapple with the whole year.
Absolutely. Now when I agree, instead of doing this, I'm gonna do this.
I know.
Because she's on the wall. So yeah, it looks like a lot of people on the 2, whether they're breaking it up by unit or by year. So we'll freeze our cameras again. We'll mic off, but we'll be here watching the chat. If you have questions, we want to give you like 5 minutes just to look through that first lens. Do you want to talk through this a little bit, what you've been hearing?
Yeah, so I see a lot of talk in the chat about alignment, about making sure that we are aligning stage 1, 2, and 3. Jan mentioned a wonderful strategy of color coding, especially if you've done emergenetics and you have a lot of green in your brain. That makes a ton of sense to you. For those of us who have mostly yellow and blue in our brain, we think that looks really pretty, but it's nothing we would think about. But I think any strategy to really help you look at alignment and look at, are our activities, our assessments, and our outcomes really aligned? And I think Michelle asked the question about struggling with activities leading to the highest level of success, and that's really what we're going to talk about and work through today. Remember, this is where we have a hefty agenda for this webinar, so please don't feel like you have to get through everything. We're trying to give you frameworks to help you as you're planning your units and some things and questions to use as you work through this process. So the second ones we're going to ask to look through, again, using your own backward plan. I know some of you are using your own, or the ones that we provided. The second lens we're going to look through is really student data. So we know, I think Kate mentioned this, when you have 500 students, or if you're at the secondary level, you have 180, and even if you have 30 or 25, none of our students are the same. And we have a lot of data in this district that gives us information about our kiddos. So the second lens to look through when you're planning those learning opportunities is, what does the data tell us about our students as learners? So some of the data we have on site and from the state, reading data, writing data, math data. We also have what Justin calls our unexpected performers data. So that's any of those educational plans or learning plans, advanced learning plans, IEPs, ELL plans. We have a lot of those in the district too that outline accommodations or modifications to make for our students so that they can achieve at the highest level. We also have information directly from our students. A lot of teachers use content pre-assessment data, either for the year or by unit, and they also use learning preferences data. Some schools use just the auditory kinesthetic visual learning data. A lot of teachers use information about their kiddos about learning modalities or even emergenetics profiles. So we have a lot of data at our fingertips, and that's really the next lens to look at as we're designing learning activities, again, to address Michelle's questions, to get kids to perform at that highest level of thinking. So we're going to ask you to practice this too. We've actually given you a student data sample set. So if you click on that first link, and I think Liz will probably put this link in the chat. If you click on that link, you'll get to a spreadsheet that has actual student data from an 8th grade science class currently in this district. So obviously the names of the students aren't on there, but this is an actual class going on right now in this school year. We're going to ask you to look at that student data and then brainstorm a list of activities, learning activities or opportunities that would be something that you might write into your stage 3 or that you would write into one of the stage 3s that we've provided for you.
So we're looking at this and pretending like that data represented our class.
Correct.
And that's our class of kids, and we're either doing the 5th grade language arts, the 8th grade science backward plan, or one of our own. And we're saying, okay, we have some stage 3 stuff there. What might we want to add or modify according to this group of actual real students we have?
Exactly.
Okay.
So when you open the spreadsheet up, you'll see there's a column on the far left-hand side that just says possible learning opportunities or activities. That's what we want you to start filling in. On the right-hand side is just any place for you to put what data you know about those kiddos. So the first step is to look at that stage 1 and stage 2. Think about possible learning activities for stage 3 based on what you know about your students. Brainstorm that list. And then start coding on the right-hand side what learners you feel like that learning opportunity would meet the needs of. So you can use A for advanced, all the way through U for unsatisfactory for the academic data and the content data. And then we're just going to use audio-visual like AV or kinesthetic for your learning modalities because that's one that everybody's pretty familiar with. So we're going to give you some time just to look at how you might use student data to help prioritize those learning activities and opportunities for your stage 3.
So you'll notice also on the spreadsheet there are 2 tabs down at the bottom. One is for learning opportunities, one for instructional strategies. You probably just said that, didn't you?
Yeah, that's it. I just have the tabs.
Yeah, so 2 tabs. So you can do it, but just brainstorm again. And we'll put those coding ideas here in the chat. If you want to do the proficiency ones, I could code down. we'll give you just a little bit of time to just look and work on it. We want you to have some thought time where you can really play with this idea.
And minus.
If you're having trouble seeing the tabs at the bottom, you might want to do like a command minus or a control minus. That'll just shrink the spreadsheet a little bit and should hopefully make those tabs show up for you. Michelle, I totally get it. I was confused initially too. So let me model, and you tell me if this helps you. So I'm going to try to share my screen. This is usually right about when my whole computer dies. So just saying. If this is one of them, say I were doing the elementary one, I'm going to scroll up a little bit. You could all type in your own self and we have a question here, or we do have it so that anybody can edit. So if you just wanted to go for it, you could all do that in the same spot if you wanted. So that would be fine. So just brainstorm different learning activities that might help. So I'm thinking about the elementary webinar sample. And we were going to talk a little bit about the inaugural poem view. So I might get a little video sample of that, and we're going to take a look at that together. So that's over here in one of my possible learning opportunities. Then I'm going to look over here, and I'm going to say, who's that going to work for? Is that going to work really, really well for my people who already know a lot? I probably spelled inaugural wrong, didn't I? Or is it going to work well for students who are maybe partially proficient on this area as far as learning about this section of language arts? Will it work for all? So I might say, I think this is going to work for anybody because I've seen this guy talk and he did a really nice job. Is this going to impact our reading data people? Nope, should be okay for everybody. Writing data should be okay for everybody. Math is not really applicable because it's not that type of thing. Unexpected performance, yeah, I'm thinking that's a pretty solid side. I have my skills and proficiencies people over here, and I noticed I'm going to add just another column, insert one to the left, that we didn't have our learning preferences. So I think that this definitely is going to be for my visual and auditory people. My kinesthetic folks are just, this isn't doing much for them. So I'm going to do a V and an A there. So I'm just thinking through that.
So yeah, so the sample student data form is already filled in with data. So you're pretending that this is the class that you're creating this backward plan for. So if you're working from one of the two that we gave you, or if you're working from your own, the backward plan is the same, so your learning outcomes are going to be the same, your assessments are the same. You're looking at this student sample sheet saying, these are the 36 or 37 kiddos that are in my class right now. You're brainstorming, the spirit of this is you're brainstorming a list of learning opportunities that you would implement given the stage 1 and stage 2 that you've created. Given the information that you have about your students, you're kind of using this spreadsheet to help prioritize what activities are going to best meet the needs of the students based on the data that you have on them. So like the example Liz gave, her example is that learning activity would really meet the needs of all students. You might have a learning activity.
Except for kinesthetics.
Except
not so solid for them.
So you may have some learning opportunities in there. So for the science one of them is the density calculation lab that she had put into her plan. So you might think about, does that really address the learning needs of our kiddos who are unsatisfactory in math? Are they going to need some scaffolding or some help with that density calculation lab? So we're really looking at matching our possible learning activities with the student data that we have in this sample class.
I like Wither, Amy. That works for me. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen on that. I'll load the PowerPoint back up. Oh, you don't see that either. Should it look like the one that I have? Well, that one was the elementary one. Any tab. Oh, I understand what's causing people trouble. I get it now. Because what was messing them up. Here, let me go back to the document. I totally get it now. I'm slow, but I'm getting there. Let me see here. This is what's causing the problem. We have this student data sheet, and they're looking for tabs on the student data sheet.
There's only tabs on the
language arts spreadsheet or the science brainstorming sheets. Yeah, that's all. That's why we're confusing people.
Right. So on the spreadsheets where you're recording your brainstorm activities, there are tabs on the bottom. One of the tabs is for learning opportunities, and one of the tabs is for instructional strategies. So you feel free to work on one or both of those. If you really just want to focus on learning opportunities for the sake of time, that's fine. Your instructional strategies, again, would be more like how you are doing instruction.
So they were here. This is the student data, and they were looking for tabs on the bottom. And then the second set of links on our spreadsheet, that has these ones. Or on our presentation, have spreadsheets that look like this, that lets you kind of go through and do some coding. So I see some people have put in some thoughts on this elementary one as well. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go back so that you can get those links. But that's what was causing the problem.
And I want to address Kate's question. Obviously, if you have 500 students, you may not have in-depth data like we presented as that some classroom teachers may have on their kids.
Not yet.
Right, so you may not have that data. You may have to be able to get it from other places or ask for resources in your building to collect that data for you. I would think about what data do you have. So you did talk a little bit about choice and differentiation, which also plays into engagement. So that's one of the lenses that we really look for when we're looking at vetting our learning opportunities in the first place. I would also ask, based on your outcomes, do you have any pre-assessment data about those kiddos being able to perform those outcomes when they walk in your door?
Well, and if she is their teacher from kindy on through 6, she's going to know her kids and what they've learned from that side. But they could be bringing things in from the home too. And I think another piece that you've helped me see when we've been having discussions about planning this webinar is you're not going to tackle all of these things all at once necessarily. You might focus on are you really good with your alignment in your backward plan right now? Is your stage 3 really lining up? And once you feel like you're good at that, then you might start looking a little bit more in depth with the student data, and our hope would be that at some point the district would have that for you in more bite-sized and anywhere accessible chunks. And then moving on, then there are some other filters that you might use. And just knowing you, Kate, I don't think that the casual observer would ever think that you were insensitive. Yes, and not yet. But you know that's, I mean, you can tell from your gut that that's a piece that you want to start working on and addressing. That's a lens that you will be moving toward. So it's a nice goal. It's good to have those stretch goals for yourself. What do you think, those of you who are plunking away either on the spreadsheets or you're still kind of working on your own, are you at a stage where we could talk about some other options? I'm not seeing much on the 8th grade one at this stage, which is fine, and I'm seeing some filling in on the elementary one, which is awesome.
I think just something that was said too, as far as looking at what your goals, what your stretch goals are for writing these backward plans. If you've done some work in differentiation too, I know that can be a really scary thing, but when you're looking at student data, the goal is not to create an individualized learning plan or an individualized stage 3 for all of your kiddos. We're trying to show you some frameworks that you can use to, when you're looking at your stage 3, these frameworks can help you see if there are glaring gaps that you may have. So if you've created your stage 3 learning opportunities and you feel like They've really, they really have been vetted through those 5 lenses of being world-class. This is a way for you to be able to sort in the spreadsheet and look to see, wow, did I really miss the boat with my unexpected performers? So did I create these learning activities or opportunities, and I really didn't put any of them in there that have scaffolds or will meet the needs of some of my advanced level students? Or did I create all of my learning opportunities at a level and I didn't differentiate any of the content? So some of my struggling learners or unexpected performers are not going to be able to perform at their best level to meet the outcomes that I've chosen. So I think it's just a way for you to be able to see, are there glaring holes or things that you can tweak to try to best meet the needs of all the kids in your classes. And they may change class to class. Like I said, this is student data from one class for a teacher who obviously has 5 classes throughout a day.
So we have some people thinking on that, in that area. Some people, I think we probably got all people thinking in that area. We have some people's thoughts already on the spreadsheet. No big deal if you didn't get it in there. This is a thought, though, that you could use for yourself. Where I had been thinking that when we were planning this webinar that this should happen in a table, right? But Natasha really pushed back on that, and I think really for a great reason, because she said, you know what? If you went through and you planned your instructional strategies and you did this on a spreadsheet, then you could sort. And you could see, especially if you weren't doing what I was just doing now, which was kind of combining, oh, this would work for partially proficient and advanced, then you could sort and you could see which activities or which learner groups you were really targeting intentionally or unintentionally, and just match that with the students that you have and say, hey, is this a good match? Because I think that's one of the big things that we're noticing in the district is that the plan is not so much about focusing on little minutiae in content, but looking at what are knowledge and skills and learnings that are going to work for lots of students over a long period of time. I think we're both thinking in the same way. All right, so that's the idea about the possibility of sorting into different topics, sorting the columns in different ways. So you could check where you're strong and where you might have some holes. Take just a minute to think in the chat. What thoughts do you have about prioritizing learning activities? Have you come up with anything new from seeing what people have put in there? Any new appreciations of challenges? Any new thoughts as far as strategies that you might use? How might those impact your own stage 3? So we want to give you just a moment, and I will stop talking, I promise, for you to think and to put those thoughts in the chat.
Did you make up? We can keep these.
All right, so we've given you all a little bit of think time, but we do want to keep going and try to stay a little bit on track in that way. So one of the things that Jan mentioned, I wanted to bring up. So you were talking about choice being a big part of any unit, including, and I love this phrase, guided choice, based on student data and teacher judgment. And Natasha, you had a really interesting experience when you were talking to a teacher at a school recently about Site Standard 3, where it talks a lot about collaborative goal setting or collaborative selection of outcome, that type of thing. What was your experience, and what have your thoughts been?
I think that when you look at some of the highly effective descriptors on Site Standard 3, teachers were again really afraid that they had to create individualized lesson plans or learning plans or stage 3 plans for all students. And I think we've done a lot of work at the middle level, and I know a lot of schools have, where they've done some data sharing and some data conversations and goal setting conversations with students so that when they look at outcomes, their students have a baseline knowledge of their own data. And I think you can do this even with younger children, saying, here are my strengths, here are my weaknesses. As students get older, you can talk really specific about what their strengths and what their growth areas are from different data points. But then in that choice then, asking students, okay then, if you're given the choice of this, this, or this, what activities or learning opportunities do you think you're going to need to be able to reach that outcome? And I think even with younger students, you can have coaching conversations in groups, so it doesn't feel like you have to have, it's impossible to have individual learning conversations with 180 students all the time for every opportunity, but you can guide their thinking so that they're, as independent learners, they're really starting to make those guided choices like Jan said.
And I think you were mentioning before we did our webinar that they were talking, that the teacher was particularly reacting to that phrase in Site Standard 3 about, which correlates obviously with backward planning stage 3, which is our topic, about the idea of collaboration and these collaborative outcome settings and things. And the teachers seem to be saying, you know what, sometimes they just need to do what I choose for them because I've been in this a long time and I know what they need. And so I think that the point that we got to in our conversation outside of this webinar was talking a little bit more on, honor that if you've been in this for a while, you know what this child needs, and that's respectful. But by making your thinking visible about why, okay, I'm going to have you do this. So sometimes they can choose, obviously. Other times you need to assign it. But making your thinking visible to that student about why you have selected this particular learning opportunity for them or this instructional strategy for them, and giving them a chance to ask some questions on that is really powerful, and it honors the expertise of the teacher, but it also honors that deep down inside need of the student to know why. Why is this happening to me in my education? So Mona's asking about guided choice. Difficult to set up teaching in teaching just one subject and ideas for a secondary level. So we're going to be thinking about that, Mona, and as we think of ideas for what you mean, we'll be putting those in, and it looks like other people are going to help out with that as well. So let's make that a team effort. We have a lot of thoughts, a lot of good minds in the room. So our third lens that we wanted to talk about in our webinar today was one final way that you could do some prioritizing. Lynn also mentioned in the chat that prioritizing can also mean sequencing and structuring which activities need to come or which learning opportunities need to come first, which instructional strategies help early on in a unit of study, which can be used better later. So that's another really valid lens that we don't have on our slides, but I wanted to highlight that. And then this is the third lens that we chose, which was lenses that might also be important to you personally in terms of stretch goals or to your site. So those could be things like rigor and relevance, differentiation according to content, process, or product, the SAMR model, like how am I integrating 21st century skills, to what level, am I doing it more at a surface level, at a substitution level, or has it really redefined or revolutionized how I'm doing things? You might be looking through the lenses of Bloom's. That's very common in our district right now to talk about, well, are we asking students to create or innovate, build something that's actually new? Are we asking them to analyze? Are we asking them to evaluate in those orders? Other things might include, for example, I know some of you are from IB schools. That might be one of the things. You mentioned a couple of the other lenses that people might use.
If you have a problem-based learning, I know some schools are doing artful learning. There are some lenses that you are going to want to look through in any of those frameworks or teaching and learning frameworks that would be in addition to the ones that we've talked about. And it depends on if you have some kind of base framework for your learning in your school.
Yeah. So that would be just an overlay as you look at how to prioritize what goes into your stage 3, and maybe even filter out things that you might have done in the past but might not meet the criteria that you're after. Kate brings up a really valid point that, like with rigor and relevance, that's more of a quadrant-focused thing. They have sort of a CD quadrant. And she said, not everything needs to be in there. But I think I saw recently from EDCSD, a Genius teacher had created her own backward planning template in which she scripted out her learning opportunities, and then she, and her assessments, she did assessments first and then learning opportunities, and she tagged them according to the quadrant in both cases because she was using rigor and relevance as one of her lenses. And then what that enabled her to do was to say, sure, not everything needs to be in CD, but if my assessment is in CD and all of my other things all of my learning opportunities are in AB, well, that's a mismatch. I haven't set my students up to be successful on the assessment. So that was a really nice way that they could look at that.
Again, I love that idea, and because I'm a very visual learner, even using that framework, some of the teachers that I've worked with, they've used that rigor and relevance framework as a Foursquare, really, to map everything out, so not even coding it, but actually putting them in
putting their activities in the
so that they can see if there's a gaping hole. And again, just like we've talked about with student data, we're really looking at, sorting and resorting and looking through and saying, are we only directing our teaching and learning to meet the needs of one group of kids? And I really love the point that Liz just made, too, is we have to always ask ourselves, not only are we giving students opportunities to meet and or exceed our outcomes, but are we really setting them up to be the most successful on the assessments that we're going to ask them to show their learning? So have we, like Amy said in the chat, scaffold their learning? We're giving them direct, explicit instruction or learning opportunities that's going to help them be successful on the assessments that we're asking them to do.
Yes. So we wanted to give you one last time where you could return to the spreadsheet or just be return to one of the lesson plans, the unit plans that you were looking at. You could use your own. You could use that 5th grade backward plan. You could use the 8th grade backward plan. We have edit rights on those. And think a little bit about coding, what's there according to Bloom's level. I think we're channeling Dana Antilla here because she mentioned that she goes through and she does some alignment coding by highlighting. And I don't really care how it happens, and I don't really care even if you type it in on the actual document. As a comment, you could highlight it and do insert comment, or you could do, if you're on a Mac, Option Command M. After you've highlighted, also throws a comment off to the side. If you're on a PC, it's Option or Alt Control M. That makes that come up. So you could do that, but mostly just look at it and say, hey, where are these learning opportunities falling? And the reason that we think that that's so important is that you have mentioned several times when we've been planning that sometimes people think that if they have a learner who is maybe partially proficient in terms of their academic area, that they should be asked to do kind of lower level Bloom's work to get them ready for that upper level Bloom's work. But what ends up frequently happening is that lower level Bloom's work takes up all their time and they never get to that. And you were mentioning something about their thinking. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Well, just rethinking, if you're really mapping out, and again, because I'm very visual, I would actually create a Bloom's triangle and put my learning activities or opportunities inside of that so that I can see what that looked like across the unit.
Yeah.
But even for our kiddos who are partially proficient or even unsatisfactory, can we think about a different way to differentiate? So can I differentiate the content and still ask them to do the same process and or product? So can I be asking them to think at the highest level? For instance, somebody was asking for a secondary learner, and I see what Russell just posted too, but if I'm asking my secondary learners to really, in the language arts class, let's say, create, evaluate, and analyze, maybe with my partially proficient readers, I have to differentiate the content or the text so that they can access that higher level thinking, or they can do that higher level thinking with the text that they can access more easily than with some text that I might give my advanced level readers. So just looking at how can we differentiate our scaffold so we can ask even our partially proficient kiddos to operate at that highest level of Bloom's. And I see a lot of different ways to organize that. The highlighting and the coding works for a lot of people. If you're a big picture thinker, I like to map everything out in some kind of mapping framework, but there are a lot of different ways just to, again, help us as thinkers visualize our thinking or put our thinking down so we can see places that we might be leaving out. Because we all know as teachers and learners, we tend to gravitate toward teaching the way that we like to learn. So if we have some
the way that we've been taught.
Or the way we've been taught.
Yeah.
So if we have frameworks that help us really look at all of our learners and see if we're leaving some kids out, that's a nice way to prioritize your activities.
This is for you, Russell. I agree. And that speaks to exactly your point. So if your academic skills might be low, I'm trying to paraphrase what I see you say there. So you're saying that even with low academic skills does not necessarily come low sophistication of thought. I was just thinking if I were a brand new teacher, and this is just because of how I am, I might print out my stage 3, cut it up, and whatever my filter was going to be, then just actually sort with the papers. And do that a few times until that became more of a habit, and I could think through that.
I just want to note that you just heard Liz Walhoff say live that she would print and cut out and use paper.
Yeah. I also used to do, for me, I would do popsicle sticks, and I put popsicle sticks also live physical popsicle sticks, not the app. I'd put them in a can, and I'd do the different types. I'd think about my groups of secondary kids, and the different types of things that different ones of them seem to really connect well to, different types of learning instructional strategies. So I'd put those in there, and I would make sure that over the course of the week, I used all my popsicle sticks at least once. So, yeah, old school, but I liked it. So that worked for me. I think given our time, I skipped through one. So, I think they already did that. They're just ahead.
And I just want to mention this next activity we're going to have you sort according to Bloom's, but all we're talking about is really looking at those learning activities and sorting them out in different ways to make sure you're meeting the needs of all of your learners. Yeah. And that's the whole spirit of prioritizing. The other piece we didn't talk a lot about in the prioritization is the amount of time that you put onto those learning opportunities. So again, based on those lenses, how much time are you going to put into that particular opportunity or activity? That's what we're thinking alike.
Yeah, it's like planning out, mapping out your time ratio a little bit and how you've divvied up your unit. I'm thinking of like a pie chart. And how much time are you spending in different areas? And does that align well with what you're asking them to be able to do ultimately? So do your forest, do your trees collectively, make the forest that you set out to make.
Right, and I think there are also a lot of ways. I'm sure, again, those of you who are talking about color coding or coding, there's a way for you to think about, are you coding those learning activities as to we should be spending the majority of our time on this, this, and this.
Yeah. So in conclusion, we wanted to give you just a moment. I think you've been doing this naturally because that just seems to be the type of learners that you are. But take a moment. You're welcome to post it in the chat. If you are more of a private and more of a process person and you want to think about this later, feel free to take a screenshot of this if you want, or you can return back to the recording of it because we are recording. Think about what it is, how does this information, what you learned in the chat from the other experts, what you learned from Natasha, from me, how does that connect with what you already knew or do regarding prioritizing learning opportunities and instructional strategies? What new ideas did you get that might extend your thinking? And then what's still challenging or confusing? What questions or wonderings do you have? And we'll be quiet for a minute so that you can do that. All about making you happy, Russell, right there. There's just such great thoughts in here. I'm scanning. I'm going as fast as I can. I need to be a faster reader. And Jan, I hope, going back to your comment of looking at them through various lenses, you could even sort according to, 1 month focus on one month focus on another. And so that over the course of the year, you're becoming more diverse, or and just different ways that you could make it bite-sized. Yeah, Mona, I get it, that you want to go back and take a look. Oh, I'd love a webinar on SAMR. We should do that for next year.
Amy, I totally agree with you too. I think that that's one of the things that, for me, being able to create a visual picture of my teaching and learning opportunities helps me be more explicit and deliberate about what I choose instead of just kind of sprinkling salt and pepper differentiation. It helps me be really explicit about, am I picking the right strategies for this particular class even? So when I create a unit, knowing that my stage 3, and again, I'm kind of speaking secondary here, but in my stage 3 for period 1 may look totally different than my stage 3 for period 6. Or it may have different interventions, or as Dr. Fagan likes to say, off and on ramps. There may be different pieces to my stage 3 depending on the data that I have on my kids in that particular class.
Yes, I see. So Rick, in case you all don't know, teaches with Colorado Cyber or EDCSD, and so when he talks about VCs, he's talking about virtual conferences using Adobe Connect. There are little breakout rooms that you can do, and he does them far more successfully than I do. So letting students collaborate and be metacognitive and think about what it is that they're doing, as well as look to the ideas of other students. Very nice.
See, Russell, you must be the lucky one who have the same students in all of your classes all day long.
That's genius. So he records, yeah, that's true. That's an advantage that I never thought about, but that's really one of the things also that I think we can look at, is if we do some recording of ourselves and we look back at it. I hate these because I look back at my recording and I'm like, okay, hate the voice, hate the hair, hate all the surface level things that make not that much difference. But doing that recording and looking back at it also, I know if in the recording I'm engaged or if I'm bored, well, it's probable that they were that as well. I agree, and that goes back to what you were saying, goes back to what Lorraine was saying about the thinking not being new. And that's good, because even though it feels like there's a lot of change right now with the emphasis on backward design and so on, it's really good stuff, and it's not necessarily du jour. The emphasis may be du jour, but there is a lot of solid research about how teaching and learning work well that just fits right into it. So I like that you're able to make that connection. Oh, and then the differentiating in AP, that's
a really big topic right now that we're working on a lot, because your assessments are, to some extent and a lot of extent, given to you.
Yeah.
How are we differentiating inside those classes, given that you have a specific, not only curriculum, but specific assessments that you're working kids towards. So that's a big conversation that's out there, along with the conversation of, do AP classes really meet the needs for our highest achieving gifted learners? Big conversations about the teaching and learning cycle inside of those programs.
This is a coffee shop discussion for you and Natasha, because I know this is something that she feels really passionate about. And I think we are reaching the end of our time together. So for those of you, I think almost everybody in here has done these before, but as far as how to get credit for the webinar, certified, you're just going to add a new page. Make sure you include the date when you title it, and then there are 3 questions. If you don't know what those questions are, just shoot me an email and I'll paste them in an email and send them back to you. Don't waste any time looking for them at all. You're too busy for that. Make sure, if you have not already done so, that you register through the course catalog so you can get credit, and throw it in the right spot under whichever PGI is appropriate for you. Classified people, you just register through the course catalog, and then there will be a link to a Moodle class that has the Google form in it. When you are looking at the session in the course catalog, also the link to the Moodle class should be up within a few days, and it does have the recording of this if you ever want to go back to it for whatever reason. So thank you so much. We are going to close out the session, and I will immediately shoot your computers out to our eval form. If you can take just 2 more minutes and fill that in, it goes just to Natasha and I, and we really appreciate the feedback so that we can get better. You help us with our practice. So thank you so much. It was great to see all 13 of you.
Bye.
All 13 of you. Bye-bye.